think, act, and prosper. You are now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. And today we're going to talk about the importance of nuclear energy, right? So I had Rick Rule on recently, and we talked about nuclear, and we talked about how this is very important for the future, especially when you're talking about clean and sustainable energy. So we're going to talk about that. So first thing is understanding what is baseload energy. So I pulled up a few different articles that we're going to look at. So let's jump into them. So I've had Doomberg on. We talked about, he talks about baseload energy quite a bit. And so let's look at this. So baseload power sources are the plants that operate continuously to meet the minimum level of power demand 24/7. So this is however much power demand, the minimum amount needed. The baseload energy plants pretty much operate continuously to provide that. And we know that wind and solar, wind isn't always blowing, the sun isn't always shining. And so it has made it hard to be a sustainable form of energy, especially when you're looking at baseload power. So baseload plants are usually large scale and are key components of an efficient electric grid. Baseload plants produce power at a constant rate and are not designed to respond to peak demands or emergencies. The baseload power generation can rely on both renewable and non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources, fossil fuels, include coal, nuclear fuels. Renewable sources include hydropower, geothermal heat, biomass, biogas, and solar thermal resource with associated energy storage. Typically, power demand varies cyclically from day to day, reaching maximum during day business hours and reducing to minimum during the night and early morning, but never dropping below a certain base. This base load is typically at 30 to 40% of the maximum load, so the amount of load assigned to base load plants is tuned to that level. So you can see right here, this is the base load down here. It continues to operate the minimum amount needed per day. It's a consistent rock for the day for the rest of the energy sources to operate on top of. And so we've seen that solar and wind are not sustainable base load energy, because that's why a lot of places are having blackouts. Germany did this when they took off their nuclear power plants and started shutting down a lot of things and become more reliant on Russia for their energy. We saw California shut down their nuclear plants and stuff. And so to have a base load energy, it has to be consistent. Now, they say fossil fuels include coal, nuclear fuels, or whatnot. And they're saying that nuclear isn't a renewable, but nuclear is the cleanest form. It has way less deaths, I believe, per kilowatt of energy that is produced versus coal, solar, natural gas. It beats everything, especially when it comes to mortalities and everything. So nuclear beats it, and it is the cleanest form. It does not produce emissions like the other forms of energy that we're using for baseload power. So when you're looking at coal and oil, and such, those produce a lot more emissions, way more emissions than nuclear. And nuclear can actually, withstand and be a baseload form of power. However, you've had people cut nuclear out of the picture, and they tend to make base load with solar and wind isn't always blowing, sun isn't always shining, and it has become very inconsistent. So when you use nuclear as a base load, you can put solar and wind on top of that. However, you have to have a consistent base load where we have plenty of, and it's very consistent. So sun isn't always shining, that's not consistent. Wind isn't always blowing, that's not consistent, especially when you're thinking about different parts of the country or different parts of the world where it's more colder, where sun doesn't shine as much, or you don't get as much sunlight in the day, you don't get as much wind, all those different things, is things that you have to consider. So this is like an article that came out last year. It talks about how the renewable energy boom risks more blackouts without adequate investment in grid reliability. In recent congressional hearings, political leaders pointed to recent electricity blackouts in Texas and California caused by extreme weather as reasons for why the federal government should increase taxpayer subsidies and mandates for renewable energy sources. But that's a hair of the dog cure that's unlikely to work. Both the heat-driven August 2020 electricity shortage in California and the cold-driven February 2021 shortage in Texas were caused by large part of over-reliance, not under-reliance, on weather-dependent renewables like solar panels and wind turbines. So weather-dependent, right? So nuclear isn't weather-dependent. Solar and wind is, as demonstrated by the temporary freeze-up of even nuclear and fossil-fueled power plants during the Texas cold snap. What the grid needs is more reliable baseload generation, not more intermittent supplies. Without infeasibility, massive investments in battery storage and other load smoothing technologies, federal policies that force states to become more reliable on renewables will only increase the probability and frequency of blackouts. So, that just says it pretty clearly. It says it pretty clearly, and it's going to have more blackouts. I mean, these weather-dependent renewables, such as solar panels and wind turbines, this does not prove to be a good base load. And so that's very important. And then we look at California. California is saying again that they are, I reached my article limit. Y'all, I'm not subscribing to them though. It says they are looking at more possible blackouts. It warns of possible summer blackouts as power runs low. State says energy supplies could be short through 2025. California has struggled to keep lights on the last 2 summers. Then we look at this Bloom Energy. It talks about just the power outages, especially in California. And you look at just how many of these there are happening. These are happening quite a bit. You're seeing a lot of power outages, and so there are some statistics on here. So blackouts are often thought as a rural problem. Not anymore. California's 5 largest cities, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, San Francisco, and Fresno, have a combined population of more than 7.7 million people. That's about 20% of the state's population. For the time covered in our data set, those cities experienced 10,417 outages, affecting the equivalent of 11.4 million utility customers, which is more than 20% of the total blackout events and more than 20% of the customers impacted. Then you look at the risk of outages growing, right? So power outages are on the rise in California. There were 25,281 blackout events in 2019. That was a 23% increase from 20,598 in 2018. The number of utility customers affected jumped to 28.4 million in 2019, up 50% from 19 million in 2018. So these blackouts are continuously increasing, and California shut down. They wanted to shut down their nuclear plant. I mean, this was written on October 2nd of 2021, not too long ago. Why California is shutting down its last nuclear plant. As blackouts and flex hours roil California, the state and local utility responsible for its last nuclear power plant, Diablo Canyon, are pushing ahead with its plans to shut it down. As despite the fact that nuclear energy is clean, carbon-free energy, and that the plant was built to operate for decades more, underlying the puzzling decision is a complicated morass of local politics, utility, economics, and fear. So there's a lot of politics going on around nuclear and a lot of pushback that's caused California to shut this plant down. Then Gavin Newsom, California governor, comes out and offers hope for the last nuclear plant, but major hurdles remain. Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant located near Avila Beach It was slated to cease operations by August 2025. In a conversation with LA Times editorial board on Thursday, the governor said the state would pursue federal funding the Biden administration made available in its bipartisan infrastructure law to keep uneconomic nuclear power plants open. But any effort to extend life of Diablo Canyon faces significant challenges, especially politically. So nuclear is a highly political subject. It's a highly political commodity and everything. I mean, people think of war, people think of all these negative things, nuclear disasters, all this stuff. But a lot of those people are misinformed, uninformed, and only informed by, mainstream media. But, the governor's coming out trying to save the nuclear plant. California, it says that California is supposed to have more blackouts because they don't have a sufficient base load power, and they are trying to operate off wind and solar, and that's proved not to work. It proved to actually hurt the people in a lot of ways. And so what do y'all think about this? I mean, this is obviously a highly political topic, but I want to get your comments down below. Let's engage. Let's talk about it. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and I want to thank you all for joining the Money Level Show. Peace.